Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to start the funeral services with Mrs. Mary Rose Lichtenstein. Rabbi Yechiel Pupko will be officiating.
Adonai, ma'odam v'teidaehu, ben enosh v'tachshavehu. Odom lahevel dama yomov kitzel over. Zramtam sheno yiyu baboker kachotzir yachalof. Baboker yotzitz v'cholof lo erev yimolel v'yovesh. Yimei shnosenu bahem shivim shana v'im bigvoro shmonim shana. V'rob homol v'oven ki goz chish v'na'ufa. Limnos yameinu kein hoda v'navi levav chochma. Shmor tamor eyashar ki acharis li shalom. Ach Elohim yifden nafshi miyad she'ol ki kocheni sela. O God, what is a human being that you take note of them, or the son of Adam that you do think of them? The human is like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. You bring men and women into this world, and then they are swept away. They are like a dream, like grass which is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. The years of our life are 70, or even, by virtue of strength, 80. Yet their pride is but toil and difficulty. They are soon gone, and we fly away. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Mark the blameless woman, and behold the upright, for there is posterity for a woman of peace. Surely God will redeem our souls from the grave, for he will receive us indeed. The Lord redeems the souls of his servants. Eshet chayil mi'imtza v'rachok mipnini michra. What a rare find is a valorous wife. Her worth is infinite. Botach bo lev balo v'shalalo yechsor. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. Gimolasu tov v'loro kol yemei chayeho. She is good to him and to her family all the days of her life. Oz v'hodor levusha v'tischak liyom achron. She is cloaked with strength and splendor. She looks forward to the future with great cheer. Piha pascha b'chochma v'soras chesed alashona. Her mouth is ever full of wisdom, her tongue with kindly teaching. Komu v'neha v'yashrua bala v'yhalilo. Her children rise up and declare her blessed. Her husband praises her. Rabos bonos osu choil v'ato li sal kulono. Many women have done great, but you surpass them all. Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi. Isha yiras Adonai hitishalo. Grace is deceptive, beauty illusory. It is for her awe of the Lord that a woman is praised. Tnula mi priyodel v'yalu v'shari ma'aseho. Extol her for the fruit of her handiwork, and let her works praise her in the gates. It is a great honor that everyone who has come to pay honor to Reise Malke Bas Reb Tzvi Hirsch has to be here. While we are few in number in this room, Reise Malke Bas Reb Tzvi Hirsch takes her last steps surrounded by those who knew her best and loved her most, and yet at the same time, people are watching, not just from the Chicago area, not just family and friends here in this area of Nathan, Howard, and Rochelle, but grandchildren and great-grandchildren from Israel are watching. And therefore it is only fitting that as we pay our last respects to Reise Malke Basreb Tzvi Hirsch, that we hear from those who knew her best and loved her most, her children and her grandchildren.
I had the opportunity to accompany my mother to several funerals, giving me a unique perspective on what she would have wanted today. My mother often complained that eulogies were insincerely flattering. She would roll her eyes as we listened together. Sometimes she would punctuate the eye roll with a brief, "Oh, please." So I know my mother would not like any fiction or hyperbole to describe and honor her. And I will refrain from doing that, although I suspect she would say, "Oh, please," during some of these upcoming recollections. I think my mother considered herself a mostly average person, not at all remarkable, who happened to live in most remarkable times, while my mother prided herself on her ability to assess people. In this case, she was wrong. While she did live through extraordinary times, I do believe that she was quite extraordinary. Throughout her life, she revealed remarkable courage, intelligence, independence, kindness, and love. I'll begin with the courage. My mother was the youngest of 9 children, born and raised in Lodz, Poland. Named Roisa Malka, everyone called her Manishu, which we think is a Yiddish diminutive. Shortly after the war broke out, when she was not quite 10 years old, Manishu's parents sent her and several of her siblings to Warsaw, believing it would be safer and better there than it was in Lodz. When the small group arrived in Warsaw to live with the eldest married sister's family, they encountered terrible conditions. The Germans were forming the infamous Warsaw Ghetto. There was lice, hunger, severe overcrowding, and public cruelty. Another older unmarried sister of Manishu, Paula, was determined to save as many younger siblings as possible. She began by smuggling them out to a small town where they owned a second home. Ultimately, all the siblings who had gone to Warsaw were killed, as were Manishu's parents back in Lodz. But Paula managed to save herself and my mother by having them both pose as Gentiles. Every time their identity was discovered, they were forced to flee. While the two of them were hiding their identities, Manishu remarkably stayed the course without blowing their cover or demonstrating fear. She turned out to be a gifted actress, displaying indignation when residents of a small town where they lived called her a Jew, or pretending to learn German for the first time when she was living on a farm working for a German family, even though she knew the language quite well from her native Yiddish. The war did not end until Manishu was almost 16. She had spent almost 6 years either fleeing the murderous Nazis or posing as different fictitious characters during the most formative time in her life. During this entire episode, Manishu showed incredible calm and resourcefulness. Following the war, Manishu hungrily sought to learn since she had been without a formal education. In one of the DP camps, she took classes with and became friendly with several other girls close to her age. 2 of those women separately told me just last year that Manishu was the queen of intelligence, their words, not mine, the smartest of the entire group. She excelled in all subjects, math, science, geography, but her passion was literature. She loved to read and in fact kept a record of all that she began reading in the DP camps. First, the books were in German, but as her English improved, she tackled English novels. The first novel, read in English, Gone with the Wind, unabridged, an epic book that takes an average reader over 30 hours to complete. When she emigrated to Pittsburgh, which is where she was randomly placed, she went to high school for 1 year in order to earn a high school degree. She entered barely knowing English, but by the middle of the year, her teacher chose her paper to read aloud to the class as exemplary. I know this part of my mother's story because she told me. While she was in fact humble, she was also highly competitive, and she was deservedly proud of her curiosity, intelligence, and outstanding grammatical skills in 5 languages. As for my mother's independence, one way it manifested is that she learned to drive when she had 3 children at home at a time when women rarely drove. In fact, once she got her license, she frequently took the wheel when my parents were both in the car. She never had cleaning help. I imagine her frugality wouldn't permit it, but neither would her independent streak and her sense that keeping home was her job, which she proudly did exceedingly well. Politically, she was also independent, while maintaining libertarian streaks, believing strongly in a woman's right to abortion, and being equally vocal about her belief that the government should not get involved in individual lives. But perhaps her independence is most evident by her handling of the finances in her marriage, something quite unique for her generation. Of course, this independence was fostered by her wonderful marriage for over 4 decades to my father Henrik, a wise, confident man who encouraged that independence. My mother's love and kindness, perhaps, are best exemplified by the way she cared for Henrik when he fell ill. She revealed nursing skills I did not know she had in her unselfish vigilance, concern, and physical and emotional care for him. It was extraordinary to witness her generous, selfless attention to him while she must have been suffering greatly. That same genuine, loving care is what she gave her sister during all the years her sister had Alzheimer's. And for her children, every morning I had a homemade breakfast with my mother, sitting across the kitchen table from me. For the 9 years when I returned home for lunch during elementary school, my mother greeted me with a warm lunch, a smile, and good conversation. Dinner time was also an opportunity to share stories from the day and eat more homemade, delicious food. Although I was not an easy child to raise, my mother rarely exploded at me. Instead, she acted with restraint, patience, and humor. Interestingly, while my mother cooked and baked with affection, she never had a passion for great restaurants or innovative food. She enjoyed travel, but cared little for architecture or design or museums or opera. At her core, she was exceptionally practical. Food, homes, cars served a utilitarian purpose and nothing more. Likewise, she was beautiful, but didn't believe in adornment. She never had a manicure or a pedicure. The only makeup she wore was lipstick and the occasional brow pencil. She never colored her hair. She never went to a spa or had a massage. I suspect this is all because she distrusted showiness. It definitely made her uncomfortable. My mother did not like talking about love. She demonstrated at every moment of her life in her actions, and she looked for love from others in the same way. Perhaps this was tied to her integrity. If she gave you a compliment, you knew it was genuine. And sometimes, often, we would get constructive comments rather than compliments. Perhaps these were a function of both her integrity as well as her work ethic. She wanted us to be the best we could be, a standard she held for herself. Even though she made friends very easily, she considered herself quite shy. She was not the life of the party and maintained a small social group. Ultimately, she was happiest at home with Henrik, reading and appreciating remarkably diverse and complex literature. For her, home was the heart of her life, and she had no interest in making a bigger mark on this world, despite her impressive life story. For me, my mother was a perfect role model. Her humble bravery, her self-reflection and intelligence, her calm demeanor, her loving relationship with my father and her siblings. These are all ideals I keep close as I face each day. Having Manishu as my mother was a true gift. May her soul rest in peace.
When Mommy was around 10, throwing her red ball against the wall of the Warsaw Ghetto, she could not have imagined that 80 years later, she would have been married for 43 years, have 3 children, 2 daughter-in-laws and 1 son-in-law that were her children also, 13 grandchildren, and 25 great-grandchildren. Who could have? Although Mommy was barely 5 feet tall, she was a giant in our family. Despite the fact that she suffered more in her first 16 years on this earth than most will in 100 lifetimes, I don't recall her ever complaining. She was always appreciative of the life in the United States allowed her and the gifts that God gave her. Though I cannot remember her ever raising her voice and yelling at me, she commanded respect and her wisdom was sought after and inspiring. Even if our television was an idiot box to her, she insisted that as a family, we would watch on Sunday evening together The Ed Sullivan Show and The Wonderful World of Disney. Despite English being her 3rd language, she read more English books in her lifetime than I ever will, and knew more grammar, and with a dictionary by her side, the meaning of more words than Harvard graduates. Even though she was the most non-materialistic person I ever knew, she always made sure our house, our car, and the clothes we had were immaculate. We wanted for nothing. She knew what was important in life. While she was reserved and her social world revolved around family mostly, if you were a friend, you had none better and would be one for decades. And although she had strong opinions, she was the least judgmental person I ever came across. She had a life that Hollywood could make into a blockbuster filled with tremendous sorrows, uplifting courage, and unconditional love, yet she was humble beyond compare. Family meant everything. To this very day, she arranged somehow that her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren still are sent birthday and anniversary gifts. I want to publicly ask her for mechila for the pain and distress I caused her during the last 64 years. I also want to publicly thank Rochelle and Nate for the last several years for the meticulous care they took of Mommy, making sure that her every need was watched after her. I owe them a tremendous hakar satov.
My brother, my sister, and I are incredibly lucky. We had extraordinary parents. Even now, I still think of them together. They loved and adored and deeply cared for each other. After I was born, my parents bought a laundromat at the corner of Diversey and Mozart. We lived in the apartment behind the store. And my mother, in addition to take caring of me, would be working side by side with my father in the store every day. They had each lost nearly their entire families in the war. They came to America with the hope of rebuilding their lives. That they ended up meeting each other here, that they got married and raised a family was a miracle. And we and our children and grandchildren are the results of that miracle. My mother had a warm smile, a twinkle in her eye, and a way of making people feel good, even complete strangers meeting her for the first time. She coped with her memories by keeping them private and her emotions in check. I recall seeing her cry only once. It was during our trip to Poland. We were walking down a street in Warsaw when she suddenly realized that we were at the location of the apartment where she had stayed in 1940. It triggered a recollection of the last time she ever saw her 4-year-old niece. My mother's foremost concern was her family. In the end, nothing else really mattered. Anything which affected her children and grandchildren was of the utmost importance. I remember growing up, she and my father would privately discuss in detail every aspect of our lives, our schoolwork, our jobs, our families. They talked to each other in Yiddish. When they found out one day that I understood what they were saying, they switched to Polish. I was never able to learn the language. Despite all she went through, my mother never showed any bitterness or anger at what happened to her. She was eternally grateful to her sister Paula, who looked out for her during the war. Towards the end of her life, my mother would often say that if it wasn't for Paula's bravery, she and we wouldn't be here. And my mother was deeply thankful for the freedom and the opportunities this country offered her and my father. She was incredibly proud of her children and her grandchildren. Their concerns were her concerns. Their worries were her worries, and she took great nachas in their achievements. The Talmud says, no monument needs to be erected for the righteous. Their words are their monuments. My mother's enduring monument is her family, her partner in life, and her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Rosa Malka Bat Tzvi Hirsch and Leah, we love you. May the memory of your life endure, and may your name be for a blessing forever.
Bobby, anyone that knew you would want us to remember the special times we had together. Before I share some memories, I have to ask forgiveness. I'm sorry I didn't visit you these past few years. I couldn't bear to see you like that. I hope you forgive me. Being the oldest grandchild, Bubby and I were very close. When we were younger, I would sleep over with Dina, and Bubby would make us the most delicious pancakes. We would use the pure maple syrup from Uncle Leo's maple tree. To this day, I only buy pure maple syrup. One distinct memory I have is when I lost a tooth at Bubby and Zadie's. In the morning, when I woke up, I found my tooth on their dresser. Bubby did leave me $5, which was a lot of money back in those days. In high school, Bubby would take us all shopping. We had our special day. We got to pick the stores that we wanted to go to. After shopping, we could pick a restaurant or go to her house for dinner. I always picked her house. Bubby would ask what I wanted to eat, and I always chose the same dinner: chicken, cauliflower kugel, and carrots. strudel, and tea for dessert. When I was in Israel for the year, Bubby came to visit me. I'm not sure if it was always her plan to come, but I would call her and tell her how sad I was and how much I missed her, so she couldn't say no. When I lived in New York City, Bubby came to visit. I am unsure if it was because I guilted her into coming, but she came. I changed my sheets so she could sleep in my room, but Bubby refused. She insisted she would sleep on the couch. After fighting a bit about it, I wasn't winning. The next morning, Bubby said we should go on a walk. I lived in Washington Heights at the time, which is around 180th Street. We walked to Lincoln Center on 59th. Bubby wasn't fazed. The energy that Bubby had was remarkable. I hope that some of her energy rubs off on me. Bubby, you were my first phone call and our first visitor at Evanston Hospital when Sammy and Dolly were born. I remember you beaming as you walked through the door and couldn't wait to hold your great-grandchildren. I know you would be so proud of all of them. As Rachie and I were speaking about our memories, one is so vivid in all our minds. Zadie going up behind her and hugging her or squeezing her. He would laugh and she would roll her eyes. It was adorable. Hopefully now he can do that again. Every birthday, we would get coin dollars. Each coin would have a picture and a message. That epitomized Bubby and Zadie's pure, simple, and humble. Bubby would always finish all her food and buy an incredible amount of pantry items that were on sale so we could all shop at her house. To my dad, Uncle Howie, and Aunt Rochelle, the care you took of Bubby and Zadie is remarkable. You always treated them with such care and dignity. The meetings, interviews for caretakers and facilities, as well as the frequent visits were done with love. My Bubby and Zadie were incredibly hardworking, humble, and honest people. May all of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren carry on these qualities.
I'm speaking for my sister Ilana. I'm speaking for my sister Ilana in Israel, who couldn't be here. So what I'm reading are her words. Bubby and Zadie were doting grandparents. They loved us fully, deeply, and unconditionally. I always believed that the mightiest response to Hitler was the large and beautiful family that they built together after experiencing unthinkable pain and indescribable loss. I love spending time with my Bubby. When I try to think about specific instances, a collage of memories surface. Family smachot and watching Bubby as she watched us. Thanksgiving at Bubby's condo, worrying about Bubby driving home in the evening when she came to any of us for Shabbat dinners. Until her last day driving, Bubby was a better driver than me. Sleepovers at Bubby's as a kid and waking up to her delicious buttery pancakes with chocolate chips. Coming home to visit from college and scheduling one-to-one dinners with Bubby to catch up and enjoy her signature fried chicken, carrots, cauliflower souffle, and homemade orange juice. Discussing with Bubby what she was reading over our meals, shopping in her pantry for all the soap and shampoo I could ever need. Leaving Bubby's condo to drive home and knowing that whether or not I looked behind me to check, Bubby would be standing at her door at the top of the stairs until I was out of view. and she could no longer see me as I was leaving. And then she would go into her bedroom and look out from the window, smiling and waving as I drove away. Shopping with Bubby when she would unabashedly tell me I was a size larger than I said I was. That was the thing about Bubby. She was loving and attentive, but it always seemed like she didn't have time for anything but the truth. She was honest and forthright and didn't need to beat around the bush to make me feel good about myself and think that I was a size smaller than I was. After making Aliyah in 2015 and quickly meeting the man who is now my husband, I was so happy to be able to bring Daron to Chicago to meet my Bubby. I told Daron, and I still tell him today, stories of my Bubby's vibrancy before the Alzheimer's. I tell him about her walking regiment, her independence, her straightforwardness, her generosity. I tell him that the person he met is not the Bubby that I knew. She's not the same person with whom I grew up and shared so many great memories. But she is my only Bubby, and she is so special to me. I was speaking with my father a few days ago, reflecting on Bubby's life and sharing memories. As I'm sure all of us would agree, we talked about how the best times with Bubby happened before she got sick, before the Alzheimer's, and those good times were abundant. But then I realized during our conversation that that's not entirely true, that I have a treasured and sweet memory precisely from within the past few years that I will hold on to forever. The memories of Bubby meeting my oldest child, Danielle. In fact, at less than 3 years old, Danielle had the opportunity to meet Bubby 3 times. He is my only child who will ever have that honor. In March and September of 2018, and for the last time in the summer of 2019. The last 2 times we brought Danielle to see Bubby, we understood that she likely didn't know who I was or how Danielle was related to her, but it was clear from the bright smile on her face that she was engaged with him, playing with a balloon and tossing it back and forth to him, that it didn't really matter. Bubby chuckled as Danielle batted the balloon at her. Danielle giggled nonstop, and the two smiled at one another. Then last summer, when we were in Chicago for a visit, we brought Danielle to see Bubby once again. He was just shy of 2 years old, and by then Bubby wasn't speaking very much. We came to visit during a mealtime, and immediately there was a change in her demeanor. Seeing Danielle, having him reach over and touch her arm while sitting on my father's lap, trying to take her spoon from her hand, you actually saw a change in Bubby's body language. And most surprising, when we got up to leave and my husband bent down with Danielle to say bye, Bubby turned her head and said hello to him. Bubby hadn't spoken to anyone in quite some time, and it meant everything to witness that interaction. While the most vivid memories of my Bubby are from prior to the onset of her illness, I am profoundly grateful that I have these final memories of Bubby with my son. I will make sure that my children know about the wonderful person and grandmother that my Bubby was forever.
Bubby, you really were the best grandmother anyone could ask for. Someone who always put her grandchildren first. Baruch Hashem, when I think about you, I think about the way you were years ago, full of life, and this is how I will always remember you. When I first got married, you came to visit us and Sarah in New York during a very hot summer. We had the best time going out to eat, shopping, and going to the Hershey store with you. When it was time to go home, we wanted to bring you back to the hotel that you were staying, so we suggested that we take a cab or the subway since it was on the other side of the city. You laughed at us young people and proceeded to walk at the speed of light back to your hotel. By the time we got there, Sarah, Jeremy, and I were all panting and exhausted, but it didn't faze you one bit. This was just a normal day's walk for you. Bubby, you always went above and beyond for your family, and whenever we would thank you or say how much we appreciated everything, you would wave your hand and say it was nothing. You really embodied the midah of Amor Ma'at V'aseh Harbe. When Amuna was a baby, I went back to work for 2 mornings a week. Instead of paying a babysitter, you insisted on coming to my apartment and watching Amuna yourself. We all know how you love babies and delighted at seeing all of your great-grandchildren, no matter how you might have been feeling. Not only did Amuna love having you as her babysitter and playmate, but we also got a special bonus as well. A few times when I came home, you told me that you had noticed that the windows looked a little dirty, so you decided to open the huge, heavy windows and clean them yourself. Bubby, I can go on and on with funny and beautiful stories about you. I just want to say that I will miss you and I will think about you every day. You will always be an inspiration to me and our whole family. I will always strive to follow in your footsteps with everything that I do. I love you, Bubby. I speak for myself and my sisters when I say our Bubby has... I speak for myself and my sisters when I say our Bubby had special relationships with all of her grandchildren, and our memories are too numerous to list. Among some of the favorite are shopping trips, Mani at her house where she insisted we take anything we need and made sure that candy nips were part of our loot, many fun sleepovers and the best pancakes ever, Friday night Shabbos meals, and the list goes on and on. Bubby and Zadie made sure we grew up with all of our cousins, enjoying each other and creating memories filled with joy and love. She was the most modest person ever and never interfered in our lives. She was the core and heart of our family. Bubby always told me it's important to love what you do. She told me this over and over again, even before dementia got the best of her. Over the years, as I continued to visit her, sometimes as her granddaughter, and sometimes she thought I was the doctor from down the street, but either way, the message was the same. She would continuously ask, "Do you love what you do?" And before I could even answer, she would say, "Because it's important to love what you do." Bubby, I will always make sure to love what I do. Thank you for giving all of us so much love and so many happy memories. We love you and miss you. Now I'm going to read something from Tali in Israel. So these are her words. When I heard Bubby passed away, so many memories flowed through my head. Sunday morning breakfasts at Bubby's with her famous pancakes, which apparently were from a box. Friday night when she would come for Shabbos dinner with some groceries and her famous strudel. I feel so grateful to have grown up so close to Bubby with the chance to see her often. I was privileged to interview her in high school for a paper. I got to hear firsthand about her experiences during the war, and I feel honored to have had that opportunity. I am sure she is looking down on the beautiful family she built. I will always think of her beautiful smile and the spirit and strength she so quietly and humbly exuded. Now my cousins Yoni and Isaac will be speaking from the Kohen room.
I've missed Bubby for a very long time, but I feel very fortunate having had so many years with her. I miss her visits where she would bring bags of sliced apples just the way we all like them. Isaac and Eitan would want theirs peeled, while she always made sure to leave the peel on mine. I miss the process of cajoling her into coming for Shabbat dinner, which was always ridiculous but endearing. We would have to come up with some excuse or reason why she needed to be here that night. After she would protest about being a burden, she would show up with 24 eggs, a month's supply of butter, and a gallon of fresh squeezed orange juice to earn a seat at the table. I miss seeing Bubby's competitive side, usually teased out by Ariel, with board games, juggling, or even some crazy jumps. Bubby always made a point of showing she could do it, whatever the challenge. I miss Bubby's angel food cake, which she always made a point of baking for me on visits, since she knew how much I loved it. She even sent a whole cake to camp one summer, which was eaten within 24 hours, with some help. I miss getting newspaper clippings in college from her, with stories she knew that would interest me. I miss her being at everything, and I mean everything. Besides the usual birthdays, holidays, and school activities, she came to Ariel's bat mitzvah all the way in Israel, and a family heritage trip to Poland about 10 years ago. But most of all, I just miss being with her. I used to go and visit her on the way back from the orthodontist in high school and college. Over a meal of pancakes, we would discuss books, politics, stories of her family in Europe, and really anything else we could think of. It's hard to quantify what made those moments so special, but I think it's simply that I enjoyed spending that time with her. One memory keeps popping up as I'm confronted with her loss. When Zadie had just passed away, Bubby started to volunteer at the Schechter School Library. Whenever I would visit the library with my class for some activity, I would see her in the background organizing books. Usually she would catch my eye at one point and quietly smile at me. It gives me comfort to think she's quietly smiling down at us now with Zadie at her side while we go about our lives.
I want to take a few minutes to celebrate the wonderful woman that Bubby was. Bubby loved her grandchildren, and her primary way of expressing that was through quality time. I've been thinking a lot about my memories with Bubby. It's difficult to pinpoint major iconic moments that encapsulate who she was as a grandmother, but here are a few memories from my childhood that I'd like to highlight. Growing up, I was really into baseball and basketball cards, and when I was about 8 or 9, Bubby took me to a big trading card convention at McCormick Place. I'm not sure if I came up with the idea on my own or if my mom decided it would be a good date for the two of us. But in the end, she and I spent upwards of 4 hours in a seemingly endless room surrounded by cards. I would not describe this convention as Bubby's happy place, or even remotely within her realm of interest, but she patiently walked around with me to different tables, never once complaining or even seeming disinterested. As long as she was spending time with her beloved grandchildren, she was happy, and I was happy too. In 9th grade, we had an English project to write about a story that must be told. When Ariel was a freshman, she interviewed Bubby about Aunt Anne, so of course, following in her footsteps, I also wanted to interview Bubby. I told the story of Paula and their survival through the Holocaust. It was hard to get Bubby to talk about herself and her past, and as we know, there were many non-truths sprinkled in. So I especially cherish the memory of sitting in her condo and feeling intimately connected to our joint history. Bubby was always modest and humble, but she spoke about Paula with contagious pride. In my teen years, my siblings and I would often go to Bubby's for pancakes. It was a very ritualized experience. Bubby would welcome us at the front door, we'd take off our shoes by her outdoor bench, and we'd sit down at a ready-made table holding a pitcher of freshly squeezed orange juice. Bubby would have the batter already made and bananas cut, and the moment we sat down, she'd put what was probably a full stick of butter into the pan. The thick melted butter smell would consume the condo, and to this day, when I smell melted butter, I'm reminded of pancakes at Bubby's. As the pancakes finished cooking, Bubby would serve us and immediately head back to the stove to make seconds, thirds, and fourths, all the while asking us for updates on our lives. After we ate more than we could handle, we'd move to the far room on the other end of the condo, open photo books, and talk about the family, historical and current. After a while, we'd take some hard candies and be on our way. I will remember Bubby as a loving, caring figure who was always thinking about others. She truly valued the quality time she was able to spend with us. I valued it too, and I will cherish the memories for the rest of my life.
On September the 1st, 1939, there were 3,300,000 Jews living in Poland. The Germans invaded. Roise Malke Bas Reb Tzvi Hirsch-Velea was living in Lodz. She was born in 1929. As you heard, her parents sent her to Warsaw thinking it would be safe. Today is November the 12th. This Shabbos is November the 14th. On November the 14th, 1940, Paula, her sister, and Mary Lichtenstein Majerowicz escaped the Warsaw Ghetto one day before it was sealed on November the 15th, 1940. This Shabbat is the 80th anniversary of her escape and her rescue. This Shabbat is also Shabbat of Chayei Sarah. This is the Shabbat that brings together for us three great women. Now, there is no greater testimony to a father or a mother than what children and grandchildren have to say. The only thing that I can do as an outsider who observed Henry and Mary Lichtenstein up close in one of their most victorious moments in life is to provide a little bit of perspective, standing back and looking at their monumental lives. Vayiyu chaye Sarah 100 shana ו20 shana ו7 shanim shnei chaye Sarah. ותמת שרה בקריית ארבע היא חברון בארץ כנען, ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah, to bewail her. We have come here a day before Shabbat Parshat Chaye Sarah to mourn and to bewail for a Sarah amongst the Jewish people. Avraham and Sarah are the only married couple in all of Tanakh for whom we have a complete and full portrait of their marriage. And the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are here today are here, as you all just heard, because of the portrait of the great marriage of Henry and Mary Lichtenstein. There was another woman connected to Sarah. We read about her in last week's Parsha. We don't even know her name. She is the anonymous wife of Lot. We know only one thing about the anonymous wife of Lot. She looked back and not forward. She looked at the destroyed city of Sodom and Amorah, and she became a pillar of salt, lifeless. As Nathan said to me last night, the central feature of his mother's life was that she was indomitable. She never looked backward, she always looked forward. And so she became a Sarah amongst women. Now, the entire book of Bereshit is a book about family and children, parents and children. But at the end of the book, there is a fateful encounter between a grandparent and a grandchild. Jacob, Yaakov, our patriarch, asks to meet the children of Joseph, his grandchildren. And he asks them one question, Mi ele, who are they? Because you know that you succeed with your children only if what you pour into them, they pour into their children, your grandchildren. To Henry and Mary Lichtenstein's grandchildren, you provided your Bobbe with something very great, and in return you got a very great gift. It is one of the most exquisite pleasures of life. It is one of the greatest delights of life to be an adult grandchild. And all of you, grandchildren, are adult grandchildren of your Bubbe, which means you learned from her, and no matter how old you were, and no matter how accomplished you were ever and always a thing of delight, pure, innocent, and ever childish in her eyes. The Book of Bereshit is the book of Henry and Mary Lichtenstein. It is the book in which Noah saw his world destroyed and continued life. It is the book in which Avraham and Sarah had to leave home behind. And I had the privilege years ago to travel with Henry and Mary Lichtenstein to that destroyed city. And by the time the war ended, those 3,300,000 Polish Jews were 250,000 in the Soviet Union, and 50,000 who had survived by hiding and by their wits in Poland. Two of those 50,000 were Paula and Mary Majerowicz. And they never looked backward. I remember what Nathan described, that moment in Warsaw where she got out by the skin of her teeth and where she was housed until the ghetto was sealed on November 15th, 1940. I remember when she watched the late Henry Lichtenstein, her partner not just in life, but her partner in rebuilding life, enter that death camp called Auschwitz with two hands held high in a victory symbol, and he said, "I won." Now we know that young children whose life vision was not yet formed, and adults who had firm ideological formation and had achieved maturity did very well after the war. The people most traumatized by the war were teenagers, because their life sense, their purpose, their ideology was not yet fully formed, and their lives were disrupted. Paula and Mary Majerowicz had their youth stolen from them. They had the childhood, and that childhood was stolen. And then they engaged in the most heroic of acts. They rebuilt life. Now, the city of Lodz, where Roise Malke, Mary, grew up, was half Bundisten, Jewish socialists, and half Ger Chassidim, followers of the Rebbe of Gur. This is an assignment for the grandchildren. You heard your parents talk about the fact that your Bubbe was utterly truthful, humble, understated, could not tolerate hyperbole. Where did you get that from? If you'll study the history of the principles of Ger Hasidism and follow it back to the middle of the 19th century, then you'll understand the Jewish cultural milieu in which your Bubbe became who she was to you all of your life, a person of truth. We are told that after Sarah died, Avraham sent someone to find a wife for Yitzchak. And we read in the Parsha, Vayivieh Yitzchak ha'ohela Sarah imo. He brought Rivka into the tent of his mother Sarah. A tent is not a bungalow. A tent is not a Cub Scout tent. A tent in the Torah is a place over which hovers the presence of the Shekhinah. And the Midrash teaches us, Kol yamim shaita Sarah kayemet, hayanan kashur al petach aholo. As long as Sarah lived, the cloud of the presence of the Shekhinah hung over her tent. When she died, that cloud disappeared. When Rivka came, it returned. As long as Sarah lived, there was blessing upon her challah, and the menorah lamp shined and brought light from one Erev Shabbat Friday until the following Erev Shabbat Friday. When she died, these ceased, but when Rivka came, they returned. Not only was your mother and Bubbe, Sarah, who saw her world destroyed and never looked back, and because of absolute devotion for family rebuilt life, she was also Rivka. because the home that had been lost, that's of Sarah's tent, she restored, and she made it a mishkan, a sanctuary, a temple, as is every great Jewish home. And when Rivka left, she received the following bracha before she became the matriarch, the successor to Sarah. She was told, Achotenu atayil alfei revava. Our sister, may you become a family, a clan, a nation of myriads and myriads, thousands and thousands. Achotenu, Majerowicz, Bas Reb Tzvi Hirsch v'Leah, you became le'alfei revava. Your monument are your children, Nathan and Aviva Lichtenstein, Howard and Linda Lichtenstein, Rochelle and Stephen Katz. Achotenu atayi li'alfei revava. You became thousands. Your grandchildren, Sarah and Ari Beitner, Ilana and Doron Pnini, Rachel and Stephen Lefkowitz, Nachi Lichtenstein, Dina, Jeremy Hartstein, Shoshana and Josh Ross, Naomi and Eli Shiker, Shira Lichtenstein, Talia Noach Cohen, Yoni Katz, Ariel Katz, Isaac and Ariel Katz, Eitan Katz, Achotenu atayi li'alfei revava. Your great-grandchildren are your monument. Talia, Sammy, Emma, Daniel, Maya, Danielle, Jonah, Kira, Leo, Gershi, Amuna, Ariella, Ahuva, Orly, Shlomo, Eliana, Gavriel, Abigail, Ezra, Kobe, Rami, Adir, Nava, Yakir, Shai, Achotenu atayi li'alfei revava. You became thousands. These are your monuments. And as Sarah passed away, Rivka then came to occupy her tent, and Rivka became a whole nation that is her matzeva. Tehei nishmatat zkura b'tzror hachayim. She is bound up in the bond of the eternal life of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Please rise for Kil Moleh. El Moleh Rachamim, Shoichein Bamrimim, Hamitzei Menucho Nircheno, Al Kanfei Hashchino, B'malois Kedoshim Utehoirim, Kezoi Harokir Mazirim, Es Nishe Mas Majerowicz, Bas Reb Tzvi Hirsch v'Leah Sheholcho li'olamo, Ba'avur she'onu mazkirim es nishmaso, Began Eden tehei menuchaso. Lochein balo rachamim, yastireho b'seisel knofov li'olamim, v'yitzro b'tzor chayim es nishmaso, Adonai hu nachaloso, v'sanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'noimar amen. O God, full of compassion and mercy, you who dwell on high, grant perfect rest and repose upon the sheltering wings of your presence amongst the holy and pure, who shine as the radiance of the firmament unto the soul of Rosa Malka, daughter of Tzvi Hirsch and Leah, who has gone to Gan Eden, and in whose memory, tzedakah, and good deeds are offered. May her eternity be in Eden. May the Lord of mercy bring her under the cover of his wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bound of eternal life. May the Lord be her possession, and may her repose be peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at West Lawn Cemetery. For information about the Shiva, for those of you who are here, the information is on the service folder. For those of you who are online, all that information is on our website. Memorial contributions in her memory to your favorite charity would be appreciated. This time I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Mary Rose Lichtenstein from the chapel, and you may return to your cars.